There are a lot of stigmas in the world financially about you're supposed to do this, or they say someday I'm going to meet they. I swear I really want to have a conversation with they just to settle things down. But one of the age-old questions is it taboo to have a retirement or a mortgage while you're in retirement? Is it not best to have the house paid for? Our answer to that is it always depends. It depends on a few different things, you, the tax code, and what your financial life really looks like. Join us today on Consider This program, and we will tell you whether a refi makes sense for you in your retirement or not. Good morning and welcome back to Consider This program. I'm your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Chris Rodgers.
And you may be wondering, why in the world are we saying good morning if you're listening to this on a podcast at midnight? Because we have a lot of people who download and listen at that point in time. And the answer for this is we have been on a radio for over 22 years, live in Indianapolis on WIBC from 6 to 7 a.m. every Saturday morning. Most of our shows are in the morning, whether that be Shine 99 or Wilo. You can listen to us on a podcast anytime. And because of the advent of technology, if you want to see the video, you can even watch it on yourlifeafterwork.com. We tape these videos so that you have the ability to watch them. Chris Rodgers, one of our associate advisors at the Financial Enhancement Group. We're 29 full-time people strong. Chris is a big part of that and is part of our team on the planning side. He's joining us tonight on the show to talk about something that he is quite familiar with as a former banker and a college student at Anderson University. So the theme is home is where the heart is. So the first thing we're going to address, Chris, is that that question: is it acceptable or is it right to have a refi or make a refinance of your mortgage when you're in retirement?
Absolutely. And, I think the bigger question that we would ask is what's your standard of living? Because really the standard of living makes the biggest impact in retirement.
Standard of living drives all financial decisions, being able to maintain that standard of living. So that would be a first one. What else goes into that discussion of whether or not a refinance makes sense?
Really, it comes down to your income as well. Income and going into your standard of living, figuring out, how much margin do you have in your current financial situation.
So here's where now, and this is put your banker hat back on, because you would have never seen this, right? So you're taking an app from the many families that we take care of that live on $80,000, maybe $100,000 a year, and we've got $2 million in an account for them, right? And you would be looking at it as a banker going, I don't think you qualify for a mortgage, right? While they're giggling at the other side of the table because you don't know how to look at the other stuff. Yep. And so I write letters probably once or twice a month for a banker coming from one of our families that says, by the way, if you needed to say they could have $200,000 worth of income, they can only do that for the next 64 years. And by the way, they're 70, right? So, it's don't get caught up in that you don't necessarily have the income or the money to pay it today. But let's focus on this refinancing. That means putting your house in debt. And understand, as a male, behavioral psychologists tell us the three most important days in a man's life are the day that he pays off his mortgage, the day that he separates from the workforce, and the day he marries off his daughter. I don't know what happens if you don't have a daughter, by the way. Just one of those things I've always wondered. I have 2 daughters, so I guess I get to address that. And I will tell you, at 2.5% rates, they can pay off my mortgage when I'm dead. It's not anything that I am going to do any time in the meantime. So, is a mortgage at retirement taboo?
I would say no. I mean, given the current market,
forget the market. So when you say the market, what are you talking about?
The current rate environment.
Okay, current interest rate environment. Now, Listen to me carefully here, right? Because a lot of people, you will hear uninformed people tell you that you can deduct mortgage interest. The vast majority of us these days take the standard deduction. If you take the standard deduction on your 1040, you do not get to deduct the mortgage, right? You only get to deduct that if you itemize, and the rules changed enough that unless you're a large charitable people who engage in large amounts of charitable gifting, the probability is that you are taking the standard deduction and you can't deduct it. But with the interest rate so low, Chris, it still might make sense.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've just seen rates, they've actually bounced a little bit higher than 3% now, but I mean, relatively speaking, taking a look back at 2008, they were right around 6% was the average. And so I think everything's relative to what's currently going on in the given market. And, it's funny to me is, not everyone understands where we're at today. I've talked to some family members of mine, and I say, well, what's your interest rate? Just the person and me trying to help them out, and they're like, well, I have a pretty good rate. It's 5.5%, and I about fell out of my chair.
Yep.
People just don't always have that person, that fiduciary around that is there to help them.
So one of the things you have to look at in this, Chris, is to you have to ask them two questions: what's your rate, and what do you still owe? Yep. Right? If you owe $50,000, refinancing to go from 5.5 to 2.5 or 3 might not make sense. Sure. But if you still owe a couple $100,000 on a house, I mean, you're talking about saving $3,000 to $4,000 a year in interest,
yes.
Right? I mean, what wouldn't you do to add $4,000 a year of income, right, into your billfold without having to do a lot of work? There's just no way around it. The thing that we always talk about as to whether or not you should refi or pay off a house is what's called opportunity cost. Right? You want to lay that out for people what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So the opportunity costs that we consider when someone comes to us and says, hey, Chris, should I pay for this house in cash, or should I look at, financing it? And the opportunity cost is, at the end of the day, what you could earn on that money versus what you're going to pay for it in interest. So if your interest rate is 2% and you're able to go out and get a 5% return, then your opportunity cost is essentially that 3%.
Yeah. So past performance is not indicative of future results. I don't want you to take it this way. So I'm going to do my best without getting into any trouble here. But I had a gentleman who was 62 years old, and they built a new house. Right. He's doing very, very well. Makes substantially more than they had ever made before. And was building this dream house and had the cash to be able to pay for the house. And he really wanted to pay it off. And the wife wanted him to listen to Joe. Right. And so now this is 6 years later, 6 years in the making. In case you missed it, the market has done, much well above average for the last 6 years in total. Right. And he can't thank me enough. The growth has been enough to be able to pay a sizable part. And it wouldn't always necessarily work that way. That's not what I'm trying to tell you. Mm-hmm. But what I'm trying to tell you is not be scared of something just based on age. You should never take any more risk than you have to take. That's true. Yes. But when you manage opportunity cost, what you want to do is look at the knowns, the givens, the facts, right? So when I finance something that is at 5%, if I paid for it, I know I'm effectively earning 5% interest. That's tax-free, right? If I have no debt, and I pay something off that would have cost me 5%, let's say a car loan, right? And I pay that off, that's like me keeping 5% of my own money. I'm not paying interest. And I didn't have to pay taxes on the 5% I saved, right? So depending on your tax rate, that may be a 7.5% savings that you're getting on your money. If you could guarantee a 7.5% savings, Chris, life is good, right? Absolutely. On the other hand, if it's 2.5% and that's the known, and you're able to deduct it, oh boy, right? If I don't believe that I can outperform that over a series numbers of years, then I probably shouldn't be in the asset management business and helping people reduce financial regrets. Right. So that's really after you factor this in. But let's talk. There's three main strategies that Chris and I want to hit if you're going to use equity in your house. Right. The first one is the possibility, if you've got a house that's paid for, the first one is refinancing into what's called cash out. And there's three reasons why you may want to consider this. The first one is to get rid of other debt. How does that work, Chris?
So to get rid of other debt is what we would call a consolidation. So if you have credit cards, if you have student loans, different things like that out there, it can make sense sometimes, obviously given your certain situation, to look at combining those into one fixed payment and one fixed rate. Again, with how interest rates are so low right now, I mean, if you're able to get a 2.5% interest rate and be able to consolidate, credit cards that are at 20%, student loans that are at 6%, some of those things can start to make sense over a period of time.
They sure do. So here's the one thing. The only time that's dangerous, in my opinion, is if you're going to go use the credit cards again once they're paid off.
Yes. Yep.
So you have to thine own self be true. But other than that, that is one of the things, that consolidation, especially if you're able to itemize where you could deduct that, it makes sense. Just be very, very, very careful with it. A second one, right, is to make another investment, buy another home or something like that. How would that work?
Yeah, so it's possible to use that the equity in your home to utilize for a down payment. So what I saw a lot of the time is folks who have a home equity line of credit, which is just a line of credit that is a essentially a lien on the house, and you're able to access that money at any time for a certain interest rate. And so sometimes they will use that money either for a down payment to be able to bridge them or to float them until they get to the new house. And then when they sell their home, they simply just throw that on top of their home equity line of credit and pay it off. So really, I think that's a very good tool. In my opinion, it's just something that it's just another tool in your tool belt that you can to utilize for whenever you're looking to make certain financial decisions.
Just because you have a razor blade or a screwdriver or hammer doesn't mean you always need to use it.
Yes.
But know how it works. So when we talk about the 3 phases of finance, you go through accumulation, preservation, and distribution when you go to use your money. Remember, there are different goals, objectives in each of those 3 areas. In accumulation, you want to make sure that you're building tax diversification and saving the right percentage of your money. As your money grows, now what you're adding no longer matters as much as what you've already saved. And in preservation, what we care about is that average return, making sure that you can stick to the ups and downs and the volatility in the market. The third, distribution, which either you will define on your own or the IRS will define it for you, or your heirs will have to deal with it, right? Your retirement accounts will exit. It is part of the deal in terms of what happens. But as we look at that, the 2 objectives inside of the distribution phase are 1, reducing the average tax rate you pay on each dollar that you use, and 2nd is reducing volatility between distribution points. Home equity has one of these things that's popped in, whether it's a reverse mortgage or another mechanism to be able to get money out. They call them HELOCs. That's the home equity line of credit. It's one of those things that you can use to help offset some of that volatility. So when the market's down, instead of taking a distribution out of the equity market, you have the ability to turn on that tap and that home equity line of credit to provide your income payments until the market is able to rebound. And then you take the profitability out of the market and you pay back down the home equity line of credit. It requires a sense of diligence and discipline to be able to get this done. But that's why you hire a fiduciary. That's why you hire the Financial Enhancement Group. Go to yourlifeafterwork.com. Get signed up for a Next Steps meeting. It's 90 minutes. It's complimentary. Chris and my planning team will happily sit down with you, walk you through the 5 critical elements. We're going to give you things that you're going to want to consider today. We don't want to waste your time or ours. Give you things that you can consider today, things you're going to want to consider in the future, and if we choose to partner together, what FEG will do for you, and we'll put it in writing. yourlifeafterwork.com.